Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Alaska Weather. I'm meteorologist Kimberly Hoeppner, and today is May 7th, 2014. In just a moment, we'll be talking about your weather across the state, but when we're not on air, you could always visit us at www.weather.gov, or you can click on or type in arh.noaa.gov and navigate our website by clicking on the destination of your choice. Now, if you'd like to get your information via phone line, it's 1-800-472-0391. And as always, we're on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Okay, taking a look at today's important data across the state for rivers, you can see these areas in blue are all areas that are mostly open or some open, as it says in this banner. And you can take and find this map at aprfc.arh.noaa.gov, and you can navigate across the state and find out how the river conditions are in your area. Areas in white are areas that are not open yet, so still frozen across much of the north where the Brooks Range and north is, and then just most of the state is open at this point. So it's been slowly melting, and there's no ice jams to report this afternoon. And the watch that was out near Fort Yukon on the Yukon River is now expired. So right now the rivers are in good condition. And at this time we'd probably go on, if there were some watch warnings and advisories, we'd put that on our next screen. Well, I have no watches, warnings, or advisories for you today. So we're going to start by looking at the satellite. Off to the west, we have a ridge that's building in across the western Aleutians and central Aleutian area, and this is just pulling some moisture up ahead of a low pressure system that's sitting off the eastern areas of Russia here. Putting this into motion, you can watch how this moisture plume is streaming all the way up into the Bering Strait. Now, taking a look at that one more time, we have some low clouds, low stratus all across the eastern Bering as well. And then closer to home, a low pressure system is really well defined out here in the southern parts of the Gulf of Alaska. This is streaming of frontal area all across the eastern part of the Gulf of Alaska. And this is also streaming clouds up ahead of this low pressure, putting it into circulation. You can see this counterclockwise spin around the low pressure system here, and the first to be affected by this will probably be the southeastern areas, and then as we go through the nighttime areas, a few showers will make it into the northern Gulf Coast and the western part of the Gulf as wraparound moisture makes it on the backside of this low pressure system. And then across the interior areas, we're seeing some cloudy skies, a little bit of snow showers across the eastern Beaufort Sea coast and on back towards the northwestern coast, including the Seward Peninsula. Some light snow showers there reported this afternoon, a little bit warmer temps as you round the southwest. So mainly cloudy conditions and some scattered clouds across the southwest, but they had some breaks in the clouds along the Bethel and North area. All right, taking a look at your weather map for today, you can see the low pressure system that's in the Gulf of Alaska. This is pushed to front just off the east coast, the southeast coast. Light rain showers, patchy fog conditions all around this low pressure, and then light rain just moving into the western Gulf, including Kodiak. Across the state, some afternoon showers are developing, especially along the Alaska Range, including the Yukon Valley area. Light snow showers as you head to the north, colder temperatures as a cold front has pushed through this area, mainly flurries. And then across the Seward Peninsula area, we have a stalled front that moved into the area yesterday. And then breaking in clouds across the Alaska Peninsula. However, there is a tighter gradient across this low pressure system. Taking a look at this, this front here, you can see you can see that the clouds are breaking up right along the Alaska Peninsula. Across the Bering, mostly cloudy skies are occurring, and as you can see, there's some light shower activity with high pressure that's building right into the eastern part of the Aleutians. Looking on to your forecast for tonight, the pressure across the Bering is not going to change that much. We have a low pressure system that's moving up into the south, pardon me. The low pressure system is moving up into the southeastern parts of the state. These showers are going to continue to be light overnight with isolated shower activity along the coastal areas. Along the northern part of the state, high pressure is going to be pulling into this area with patchy fog along the coast, some light snow shower, flurry activity along the eastern part of the Brooks Range, and then high pressure is going to be just building from the northern Pacific up into the Aleutians. Now, as we head into your forecast towards the end of the week, Thursday, we're not seeing much change in the activity. The low pressure system in the Gulf is going to slowly be pushing towards the east, and the weakening gradient will see these wind gusty conditions across the Alaska Peninsula, but that'll be tapering off later in the day as this high pressure builds in. Patchy fog again across the eastern parts of the Bering, with this low pressure system being the dominant pressure system all across the western parts of the Bering. And then across the northwestern coast, we'll have a clearing of the snow conditions as we head through your day on Thursday. Like I said, all these pressure systems are going to be petering out, and including across the southeast, low pressure will push inland, and mainly some light showers as weak energy continues to rotate around here. A weak boundary is going to stay across the eastern parts of the state, so we'll see some shower activity across the eastern parts of the Alaska Range, mainly afternoon showers, and especially around the mountainous areas. Mainly south central will be on the drier side of things, and this warm front that pushes up to the southeast, that's going to allow for the temperatures to stay warm across the south. The cold front that moved into the northern parts of the state, that's going to stay settled in over the area, and hence the mix of rain and snow showers over the central and eastern part of the Brooks Range on Thursday. Now, going into your Friday forecast, we have a weak boundary as that front pushes off into the southeast, some isolated showers mainly across the southeastern, and then a drying out as high pressure builds into the southern part of the state from the Alaska Peninsula. High pressure is going to be the dominant pressure system that is going to bring drier conditions as we head on Friday and into the weekend. So with the warmer temperatures that are going to be in place across the south, we didn't see a lot of rain with the low pressure system that came across as it skirted well to the south of the Gulf. So some showers recorded up to 1/10 of an inch, mainly for areas that had seen prolonged rainfall, but really not much across most of the state. So with these warmer conditions, vegetation is dry, especially in areas where we have leaf debris that's dried up over the winter. So we need to be really careful on lighting fires and making sure that we put those out if you are burning anything, because we are going into our fire weather season. Now, if you look off across the western parts of the state, we'll see some patchy fog, and rain will be petering off across the central areas of the Bering. The low pressure system across the western Bering will keep this front in place over the Bering Strait with a mix of light rain and snow, and across the northwestern coast they might see a few more flurries as we have a little bit of a gradient here between the pressure systems. High pressure is going to be the dominant along the northern coast, and cold temperatures are going to stay in place from the Brooks Range and north. Now, taking a look at your temperatures today across the south central and western Gulf, temperatures were in the 50s, very nice, even into the 60s right just north of the Brooks Range. Across the southeastern areas got up to 64 in Petersburg today, but generally they saw into the 50s today with cloud cover keeping them from getting very warm there. And then looking at the northern coastal areas, we saw temperatures climbing up into the 20s and 30s. As I said, there was a cold front that pushed in, so high temperatures were just below freezing in most locations. As you wrap around to the Seward Peninsula, temperatures near freezing, and just above as you creep down towards the Kuskokwim Valley. Across the southwest, they saw temperatures climbing into the mid-40s to lower 50s, and the Alaska Peninsula saw temperatures in the lower to mid-40s. Across the rest of the areas of the Bering, mainly in the lower to mid-40s, with cooler temperatures across the western Aleutians at 39. Looking at your low temperatures for tonight, temperatures are going to get a little bit cold across the Brooks Range and north into the upper teens and 20s. And then as you head towards the central parts of the state, in the 20s with low 30s as you get towards the Alaska Range. Across the southeastern areas, look for temperatures in the mid-40s, and across the Alaska Peninsula and Aleutians, mainly in the lower to mid-30s through the chain. And then temperatures for tomorrow will be very similar today, temperatures reaching into the mid-40s across the Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, and all across the southern areas of the state, with temperatures peaking a little bit warmer just north of the Brooks Range and along the southwest, probably near 60 in some locations or just over. Across the southeast, temperatures again in the mid-50s to lower 60s. And then across the northern areas, temperatures will only be in the 20s. Let's take a quick look at your flying conditions for tomorrow. We have MVFR conditions widespread across the Gulf, and then IFR in the central Gulf locations, MVFR across some of the Alaska Range, and then improving through the day. IFR, MVFR conditions across the eastern Beaufort Seacoast, and then across the southwest we'll see MVFR conditions maybe a little bit further east than what's anticipated here, but most likely it'll stay off the coast. IFR conditions as well in the central parts and western areas of the Bering. Looking at your passes in more depth, we have Anatuvik Pass, which should be MVFR in the morning and then clear to VFR later in the day. And then again, we'll go MVFR to VFR. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass will be VFR, and Rainy Pass will be VFR as well. Looking at Windy Pass will be MVFR through much of the day, and then Isabel Pass will be MVFR to VFR later on in the day. And Mentasta Pass will also MVFR and clear to VFR. And Tanita will go MVFR to VFR. And Portage may continue to be MVFR for much of the day, with possible clearings later in the afternoon. Chilkoot and White Pass should both stay VFR all day tomorrow. And your freezing levels for tomorrow in the morning, from 2,000 feet across the central areas of the state, and then 4,000 or just greater across the southeast and much of the eastern parts of the state. Across the Bering, looking at 2,000 to 6,000 across the Aleutian areas. The surface freezing line just across the central and northern Bering, and then across the southern parts of the state, and all the way up towards the northern Brooks Range, where it had gotten quite warm. Now tomorrow's icing conditions mainly around the low pressure system in the Gulf and the northeastern parts of the state, and then across the northern parts and western parts of the Bering. Looking at your jet stream for tomorrow, we have this ridge that's building in. The main jet stream is a easterly flow here, or westerly flow, 100 knots just south of the chain, and a little bit stronger, a little bit faster speeds just to the south. The low pressure system here is fairly weak, between 25 and 50 knots. Now our low pressure system here, like I said, it's only 35 to 40 knots at the 9,000 foot level, and then across much of the state it's between 15 and 30 knots out of the southwest. Across the Bering, we have a change of direction around the high pressure system, so fairly light winds between 20 and 30 until you get out towards the west, where it's between 25 and 45. For your 3,000 foot winds tomorrow, high pressure at 3,000 foot as well, between 20 and 25 mostly, strongest winds towards the western Bering. And low pressure here, we'll have a little bit gustier winds as you head down the western part of the Gulf, and then light winds, very light winds, as high pressure is the dominant area across the east. Now for your turbulence tomorrow, there isn't any across the main part of the state, but we will see turbulence below 8,000 towards the western part of the Aleutians. We'll be right back with your marine forecasts. Please stay with us.
A flood mitigation plan can help communities identify measures that can be taken to reduce damage to property and risk to life caused by flooding.
Well, this is an anchor for the boardwalks. We got an anchor about every 20 feet on both sides. So if the water comes up, don't move the boardwalks around. Before we had these anchors down, we had boardwalks maybe about 10 feet off the current after the flooding went down. The cable's just like a harpoon tip. You drive it down and pull it and it's wedged itself, locked. We had this for a couple of years now. Last year we didn't have no problem with boardwalk repair.
Every community is different because of its history, people, geography, weather, and location. All of these factors can be a cause for flooding or a benefit that guards against flooding.
Those chunks were really big around here, too. We had water clear up to the steps up here.
We saw it land.
Communities need to know their flood history and to also understand that while past history is very important in predicting a flood, it is no guarantee because weather patterns are constantly changing and places that never flooded in recent memory might flood today. They need to identify the flood-prone areas of their village. With this knowledge, good decisions about site locations for new buildings or moving old buildings can be made.
You were here when it flooded so bad you were up to that marker. Has anybody talked about moving the post office?
I wouldn't mind if it's moved. I think this is a bad place for it with flood every year. It doesn't always come up, but I think it would be better if it was up in a higher place.
89 we had a flood. This was what happened during the flood. It was a good spot down here. I wasn't worried about any flood. I didn't think we would have any. Built my house back in a little higher ground than where this is now.
You think you'll have problems with flooding in your new house?
I don't think so. I hope not. It's a little higher than where this one is.
It's pretty sad to lose your house, but can't do anything about it, I guess.
But not all buildings can be moved to safe ground. In these instances, communities can take other measures, such as flood control projects, seeking assistance from state and federal agencies, flood insurance programs, flood alert systems, public awareness and preparation programs, and learning the benefits of land use regulations. There is also the reality that many villages are located in floodplains where flooding occurs yearly. However, serious damage can be avoided if structures are built out of the floodway. Floodproofing buildings will minimize damage even in floodplains. This can be done by elevating living spaces above flood levels and good soil drainage. If structures have to be built in floodplains, then access routes to higher ground are essential. Other factors that need to be considered are erosion, wave action, and drainage impacts. If buildings are elevated in floodplains, utility pipes, electrical connections, water and sewer lines, and fuel and propane tanks also need to be floodproofed according to code. To enforce sound building practices in floodplain areas, it is a good idea to require development permits from individuals and even government agencies. Decisions that are made by others outside the community, even government agencies, should be filtered through the collective wisdom, knowledge, and life experience of the people who live on the river. One way to ensure good decisions and good development of your community is to learn all you can about your river, your history, and where you live.
My little nephew Chucky, he come home for a week. He was disgusted with that school teacher. We cannot get that teacher to put things up. Well, this is what they're used to doing every spring. It's a precaution that everybody takes. And the school teacher is pretty new, and he said, oh, you kids don't know what you're talking about. And about, oh, I don't know, about midnight, the water started coming in, and I mean, it came in a hurry. Well, the poor school teacher, he had to roll up to the store and got his wife and his 2 boys out. And so he got out. Next day we came down and we walked around and he was out there. Oh man, I tell you what a mess he had. Everything was wet in his house. These little kids came along, and my nephew and his little buddies. Mr. Rasmussen, you should have listened to us old timers.
We should get an A in this course.
Mr. Rasmussen was quite disgusted, cussing under his breath, and my brother and I, we laughed so much over that. But everybody knows every spring you have to be prepared.
Welcome back to the show, and now on to your marine forecast. Not much change in the ice conditions as they're still in ice across the northern coast and northwestern coast, but with the warming temperatures and southerly flow, possibly we'll see some change heading into the weekend. Okay, for your Thursday marine forecast across the southeast, expect lighter winds across the inner channels between 10 and 15 knots. Seas will be between 2 and 3 feet here. And then in the outer waters, 15 to 20 knots out of the east with seas between 6 to 8 feet. And as we head into your Friday, a change of direction of the winds, mainly 10 to 15 knots all across the area out of the north, and then 2 to 3 foot seas across the inner channels, and 7 to 8 foot seas across the outer waters. For your south central and western Gulf areas, look for lighter winds across the Prince William Sound, and the western Gulf will see between 15 and 20 knots, and then across the Cook Inlet and Shelikof Strait also between 10 and 20 knots. Seas here will be between 7 and 6 feet, except for 2 feet across the Prince William Sound, and then across Shelikof Strait 3 feet, 5 feet across the Barren Islands area, and Cook Inlet will see 2 feet. And then as we head into your Friday forecast, variable winds across the Prince William Sound, northern Cook Inlet, and just off the Kenai area, 10 knots, and 15 to 20 knots across the western parts of the Gulf, and 15 to 20 as well across the southern part of the Cook Inlet, and 15 across the Shelikof Strait. Seas on this day will be between 4 and 5 feet across the western Gulf, 2 feet across the Prince William Sound and Cook Inlet, and then 3 to 5 feet across the Shelikof Islands, Shelikof Strait, Barren Islands, and Southern Inlet. Now looking at your Alaska Peninsula, winds will primarily be out of the out of the west and northwest, 15 to 20 knots all across, and seas will be between 4 and 6 feet across the Bering and the northern Pacific waters. On your Friday forecast, 10 to 15 knots out of the west, variable towards the eastern part of the Aleutians, and then across the northern Pacific, 10 knots just south of the peninsula, and towards Kodiak out of the northwest at 20 knots. Looking at seas here between 3 and 5 feet on the Bering side and 4 to 5 feet on the Pacific side. Looking at the Aleutian chain as we head into your Thursday forecast, small crafts for the western and central Aleutians as that low pressure system is out there. Out of the south, the winds all across the chain with the lighter wind speeds between 15 and 20 knots as you head towards the eastern part of the Aleutians. Seas will be between 7 and 10 feet across the central and western Aleutians, and then between 5 and 7 feet as you head towards the east. On your Friday forecast, look for winds out of the south to southwesterly direction. Small craft advisory again for the central and parts of the eastern Aleutians. And we're looking at seas between 7 and 9 feet, primarily across all of the Aleutian chain. Now heading into your western coast areas, winds will be out of the west and southwest between 15 and 20 knots. Seas and ice-free waters here will be between 2 and 6 feet until you get down towards the Pribilof Islands. Seas will be as high as 7 feet. And then as we head into your Friday, a southerly wind across the northern parts of the Bering at 25 knots, small craft advisory here, and 15 knots out of the west as you head towards the Pribilof Islands and just off the western coast south of Nunivak Island. Seas will be between 4 and 8 feet. The highest seas will be out towards St. Matthew Island. And then looking at the north coast and the northwestern coast, we'll see 15 knots near the Kotzebue Sound area, and then out of the southeast at 10 knots as you wrap around towards the Arctic coast, and then a change of direction, 10 knots out of the north towards the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. All of that covered in ice, and then as we head into your day on Friday, stronger winds out of the south for the Kotzebue Sound at 20 knots, and southeast at 20 knots across the northwest, and all easterly flow across the northern areas between 20 and 25 knots brisk winds as you head further east. And looking at a quick summary of your forecast for tonight, light showers across the western part of the Gulf and a warm front moving up into the southeast, lighter snow across the western parts of the state, and scattered shower activity across the Bering. Thanks for staying with us today. My name is Kimberly Hoeppner, and we'll be back with you again tomorrow.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.